The second part of the second lecture on Royal Arch chapter. Lithuanian Most Holy Royal Arch 3 Crosses Hill chapter near 61. Yours, Companion Odris.
From Companion Odris. Companions, we continue our lectures on the Royal Arch chapter. As mentioned before, if you feel a bit overloaded with the main officer's presentations, you may go straight to the slide What Was Lost and Found.
From biblical history we find that Ezra was a priest, and a skilled scribe in the law of Moses, and a trained teacher in the statutes and regulations of the law. By his own request, Ezra was commissioned by the Persian king, Artaxerxes, to go to Jerusalem, carrying rich gifts and offerings for the service of the temple. Ezra's retinue comprised of nearly 2,000 people, including priests, Levites and servants. After a journey of nearly 4 months they reached the safety of Jerusalem. Once there, Ezra re-established the law of Moses among the people. But the people still had a tendency to wander away from the words of God, written by Moses. Ezra was appalled because of the people's sin, deeply shaken. Ezra tore his clothing and hair and went to the temple, where he fell on his knees to the Lord in prayer. Having accomplished great reformations by separating marriages with strange wives, and having appointed judges and magistrates, Ezra then returned to Babylon to make a report to his king. 13 years passed and Ezra again traveled to Jerusalem, where he was actively engaged with Nehemiah, who was then the civil governor. Ezra collected the ancient sacred books of his people, and then prepared and circulated copies of the Holy Scriptures. It is tradition among the Jews that by Ezra's legendary achievements, the services of the synagogues were established. There is no reliable record to be found concerning Ezra's death, but it is assumed that he returned again to Babylon to live the remainder of his days. We now understand who most of the principal officers of the chapter are, but what of the sojourners, who play such an important role in our exaltation ceremony, and the story of the rebuilding of the temple. Think for a moment about the central part of our story. 3 men returning from captivity in a foreign land, where on at least one occasion they had been in danger of wholesale massacre because they were Jews. They came back to the ruins of the city of their great King David. This was the city where King David's son Solomon, under whom their nation had seen its greatest age, had built a house dedicated to God. The house where the ark, which bore witness to the covenant of God with his people, had finally come to rest. To the sojourners, the city was sacred, and part of their history. It was made more precious because until then they knew it only by repute. Now they saw it. The place where God had brought his people from their captivity in Egypt, and had now brought their generation out of Babylon to cause his sacred name to dwell. What did they expect to find? What they found was desolation, and deserted ruins. Where, once the temple had proclaimed the majesty of God, and the authority of his people, and all that was most sacred to them, lay forlorn and ravaged. It must have been a terrible experience to these travelers. It must have been a vivid reminder of the disobedience that had led them into captivity. Small wonder that they were contented in what Zerubbabel offered them, that they replied, "Any position that your excellences appoint us will be deemed an honor conferred," and they meant it so long as it related to the building of the house of God. So now we know of the humility of the sojourners. What was it that the sojourners were sent to find? We should not take our ritual too literally. Remember that it is based more on legend than fact. One thing is for sure, that not even in the darkest days of the dispersion of the Israelites was the name of God lost. They may have ceased to worship him, but the prophets and reforming kings of Israel ensured his name was not forgotten. It is said that what King Solomon lost, and also the kings that came after him for the next 400 years, was the belief that Jehovah was the only God of Israel, and that Israel had only one God. This was a religious secret known only to the children of Israel. The loss was due to the fact that Solomon and most of his successors disobeyed God's commandments and worshipped gods of other nations. What was found by the time the captives returned was that Jehovah was not just the only God of Israel, but that he was the God of all nations, the one and only God for all mankind. Only on their return did they realize this for the first time. It was this discovery that became woven into the fabric of our Royal Arch legend. A legend that is meant to point the way to a belief in the true and living God Most High, as seen by each companion. A legend that contains a secret that paradoxically is not a secret, namely, that Jehovah is not just the name of the God of Israel, but the name of the God of each and every one who lives on earth, be he Christian, Muslim, Hindu or a member of any other religion. He is the true and living God of us all. So, remembering when each of us was exalted, towards the conclusion of the ceremony we are told that we are entitled to hold a staff of office unless 72 or more of our elders are present. So what was the Grand Sanhedrin, and the number 72? The Grand Sanhedrin and the number 72. During the ceremony the sojourners are told to report any discovery to the Grand Sanhedrin. But what was the Grand Sanhedrin? It originated from the Council of Elders formed in the wilderness when Moses was instructed to select 70 men to form a tribunal for judicial and administrative purposes. This he did, but on their return from the tabernacle, 2 other men had received prophetical spirit, and Moses added them to their numbers. This makes the 72 used in our ritual today. It wasn't formed from 6 members from each of the 12 tribes, as is a popular misconception. There is legend that there were 71 seats around King Solomon's throne, and this council of state assisted the king, again adding King Solomon to the number makes 72. The number 72 features again with the Jews when the Bible was first translated into ancient Greek. It was said to have been done by 72 translators, 6 from each of the 12 tribes of Israel. This task was completed and agreed upon in 72 days. The supervision of matters relating to the temple almost certainly came under the control of the Sanhedrin. It is not surprising therefore that those companions making the discovery in the vault should be rewarded with seats amongst the rulers and princes of the people. Following our exaltation, we are told that a perfect knowledge of this supreme degree cannot be obtained without attaining the 3 principals' chairs. But why does each principal wear a different colored robe, and what is the significance of the colors? What are the royal ARCH colors? We hear each year at the installation convocation, the explanation of the robes of the principals and the significance of the colors. But where do the colors come from? For this we need to travel back some 3,500 years to the time of our Grand Master Moses. The book of Exodus tells the story of the time the Lord spoke to Moses, and told him how the Jews were to live. He also taught them how to pray. He gave instruction in how a moving temple to his glory was to be built, and thus the tabernacle was formed. The Lord gave Moses instruction in the colors to be used in the fabric of the tabernacle. These colors were red, purple, and blue, or blue, purple, and scarlet, depending on which version of the Bible you read. These colors were said to represent the elements. Red for fire, purple for the sea as the blood of shellfish dyes it, and blue for the sky. The Lord chose Bezaleel and Aholiab, other names in our ritual, to prepare and sew the cloth for the tabernacle. The Lord also gave instruction on what the high priest should wear, and the color of this robe was to be blue. This shows why the colors for the robes of our principles are so important, and it also shows just how old some of our practices date from. So, when you wear those robes, remember these robes represent one of the most holy items of the Israelites, and wear them with pride. In Royal Arch Masonry we were told that the penal sign is the only perfect sign in Freemasonry given with the left hand. But, why with the left hand? It is a tradition in Royal Arch Masonry that we use the left hand on many occasions, the penal sign, for taking wine and carrying our sword. The answer to the question lies back with our ancient brethren, who returned from Babylon and started to rebuild the walls of the city of Jerusalem. It is said that they had their trowel in their right hand with which to rebuild the city walls, whilst their left was free, with which to fight. The sword would have been buckled to their right side, and it is from this legend that we in respect to them wear our sash upon our left shoulder to hang on the right side, symbolically to hold our sword. The building of the city walls was of such importance that to put down one's trowel was not allowed. This is why we use of the left hand for the penal sign, the sign signifying the sword. As for taking wine, when a stranger approached, how should one greet him? By laying down one's trowel, and shaking his hand whilst holding a sword in the left. Not a very friendly welcome. Would it not be better to put down one's sword and to drink his health with the left? We have read why it was necessary for a soldier to be able to use his left hand to hold his sword, but there was a further reference to the military. Why are we not brothers? The word companion originally came from a military background. It referred soldiers who shared bread together, messmates. Your companions were the men with whom you ate in the barracks and with whom you fought in the field. They were the men who you defended in battle, and who defended you. The men on who your own life might depend, and they in turn on you. Your relationship is closer than friendship, closer than that of a brother. Relationships made in battle are hard to forget. In the Royal Arch, our relationship to each other is a closer one. The term brother is not enough in the Royal Arch. We need something more. And we have it in the relationship of a companion. We should be proud of this bond, this relationship, to call each other companion. Finally, we turn our thoughts to the room in which we meet. Why do Royal Arch chapters meet in the rooms that they do, and why are they set out in the way that they are? Where we meet. You may say instantly, your Masonic Hall, but that would deserve no prize. Perhaps we should therefore look closely, and study the full significance of just where we meet. The first place is in the open air in the wilderness of Sinai. We are on a journey from the slave camps of Egypt, across the Red Sea into the desert called Horeb. What you see before you is part of what it must have looked like to those Hebrews as they camped. The second place is within the tabernacle or sanctuary, the moving temple that traveled with them on their journey. The surest sign that we are in the presence of a holy place is that there before our eyes is a pillar of white marble, on which a bowl of incense would once have burned, placed in the outer chamber of the Holy of Holies. The third place that we meet is the Grand Sanhedrin, which gathered in the courts around the Holy Temple, and here we meet further exiles that return from faraway lands. Zerubbabel the prince, Haggai the prophet, who foretold of his return, and Joshua the priest, who helped restore worship at Jerusalem. Also in this place are Ezra and Nehemiah, and other companions who formed the Sanhedrin. These then are the three locations that we find ourselves today, in the wilderness of Sinai, within the tabernacle, and around the Temple of Jerusalem. In each case we are in sacred territory and bound on the Lord's business.
From Companion Odris. Companions, now we are roughly aware about the Royal Arch chapter story, which we will continue exploring together and individually. Otherwise, we will not experience all the beauty of this ritual, and we will run a risk that our convocations will become just a regular obligatory meetings of nice friends. Let's start studying the ritual. Each of the officers should clearly understand every step he is performing, and meaning of every sentence pronounced. If something's not clear, you will always have hand of companion. Excellence in performing the Royal Arch chapter ritual is absolutely amazing experience that should be achieved by working together and studying the RA chapter ritual individually only. Yours companion, Odris.